This is the Active Commercial Real Estate Investing Show, a podcast designed explicitly for the ambitious commercial real estate investor who wants to generate outsized returns. Hello and welcome to the Active Commercial Real Estate Investing Show, brought to you by the one and only School of Commercial Real Estate Investing. I'm Patrick, and today we are joined with Powell Chee. Powell purchased his first residential property in 2015 and transitioned to commercial real estate investing in 2017 when he purchased his first apartment building. Since then, he's acquired over 1,000 apartment units, and during the pandemic, Powell actually began shifting from multifamily properties to self-storage and is now the managing partner at his company, Radiant Storage, which currently has 16 self-storage locations with over 5,000 units. Powell, welcome to the show.
Hey, Patrick, really appreciate it. Thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Our pleasure. Noelle is sick today, so she's not able to join us, but definitely excited to have you here and learn from your wisdom and the journey that you've been on. So can you kick things off with just an overview of how you got into residential real estate investing and what then tipped you to get into commercial?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Well, really quickly, it was, I had always sought out sort of alternative investments. And there was a time where around 2015 was when I got involved in my very first single family house. And I live in California. So I live in Southern California, which is not cheap, right? And so I just really was struggling with the idea of like, how am I going to buy a house here? And then what am I going to do? Fix it up and flip it, or I don't know. I was just like, these houses at the time were like at least $500,000, right? And I was like, that means you got to put down a minimum down payment of like $100,000 just to buy it and get it get a loan on it. I just didn't really feel like that was really an avenue that I could just go down, right? And then how many of them am I going to be able to do a year? I don't know. It just didn't really feel like it was really that tangible. And then I started learning about being able to invest outside of where you live. And that was just like a, mind-blowing experience right there, where I was like, there's a lot of people that lived or, bought a place in a certain area and then they moved and they just kept it as a rental. And so they were like, hey, they lived in Ohio and now they moved to Florida and they kept it as a rental and they were able to operate these things, across the United States. And I was like, wow. So I started really being keen on how to do that. What were the ways that they did that? And after a while, I just became really comfortable that I don't have to live where I'm buying a rental place. So that really started to open up the whole United States to me. So I was like, I don't have to buy something in Southern California. I can look for all over. So I looked in Kansas City, is where I bought my very first one. And that was ended up being a really good property. It was a really nice one. I made some good returns. I actually never saw it. Even though I bought it, held it for a while, and then sold it, I still have never stepped foot anywhere near the property. So, but that was a good experience. Although it was after I bought that one, I pretty much knew right away that this was not going to scale to the speed that I wanted it to. I was in my head, I was thinking I was going to buy one house a year. Take 10 years, I'll buy 10 years, I'll have 10 houses. And then I was like, well, 10 years at 10 houses, I'm making about $200 to $250 per month in like pure cash flow after all the expenses. I'm like, that's still going to give me like $2,000 to $2,500 a month in 10 years. I was like, wow, that doesn't sound like the speed that I want to go to. So I wanted to go a lot faster than that. So that's what brought me to my next purchase, which was a apartment building. So I bought an apartment building in Indianapolis, 40-unit apartment building, very beginning of 2017. So about a year after I bought that very first house, and started to just get into commercial real estate. Was involved in a lot of. So I bought that one. I bought another one the following year, 2018, with a small group of friends and family. And then 2019, basically became a general partner on 5 different syndications that were fairly large apartment buildings all over the United States. And then when 2020 came, was really COVID and made me put a pause on buying any multifamily at that time, buying any commercial. I would say just buying any real estate at that time. I just thought that I didn't want to bring my investors into what was a lot of uncertainty. Lending was uncertain, getting paid was uncertain, courts weren't open, delinquencies were going up, and whether or not people were going to get some kind of check from the government, all kinds of things were going on. So I didn't want to bring my investors into that. So I decided at that time, let me spend some time to look at another asset class, and that asset class happened to be self-storage. And from there, I thought, hey, this looks like a great asset class. I want to move forward and go ahead and purchase one, because you don't really know until you actually own one, right? It's like, sounds good on paper. It looks good on you hear it on a podcast. It sounds great. And like I read in a forum, it sounds amazing, but until you own one, you don't really know. So then bought a very first one in January of 2021. And yeah, since then, up to 15 more properties, so 16 total at this point of self-storage. And so that's what kind of brought me into my journey. I don't know. Happy to fill in any blanks there too, as well.
Yeah. So one blank I would love for you to fill in is for that first apartment building. Was that self-funded, or did you do a joint venture for that? Because you mentioned that you didn't do a syndication until your third or fourth one.
Yeah, that was actually self-funded. So, one of those things, if I tell you the price of it, you'll be like, wow. I mean, but back then, 2017, you could get deals like that, right? And you're like, wow, that's amazing. I would buy that deal right now. It's like, yeah, I mean, back then you could. So it was self-funded, but it was also, I would tell you that I ran that deal by myself for a number of years. And there's kind of a sort of maybe a hope for a lot of investors that, hey, maybe I have to partner for a while, but eventually I'd like to just own everything in my whole portfolio by myself. And that's very possible, and very, it's a great aspiration. But I would tell you that there is, from experience, there's a lot of issues with owning a property by yourself. And it's really because, are you the jack of all trades that can handle every single thing, that is going to handle every single thing? Then I'm talking from, from finding the deal to running it, to doing the due diligence, to putting it under loan, all the legal documents you have to go through, all the due diligence you're going to go through, and then you got to run it as an operator. So that requires, project management skills, operational skills, contracting, being on the phone with different vendors that you gotta have a relationship with, your property manager, and accounting, all that kind of stuff that goes through. And then if you want to do another one, that's just one building. You got to go do it again and get another building. So I just found that there's certain things in there that I don't like and I'm not the best at. And so I think it was in 2022, I believe it was 2022, I actually brought on a partner because there was things that I didn't really like. And I wanted to bring on somebody who could help me. So I do have a partner in that deal now, and it's just him and I. And I guess funny enough, we're under contract. And so hopefully that thing will actually sell in less than a month here. So one of those deals that can sort of come full circle at that point.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks for pointing that out, because I think I agree. There are a lot of people, myself included, who have had those thoughts about, oh, wow, it'd be great just to have full control over large buildings. But I do think that the team component is very important, especially as you reach the efficiencies of scale and are dealing with larger properties. You can't do everything and you can't be everywhere at once. So really building that team around you is definitely an important lesson. So thanks for pointing that out and sharing that. With the self-storage, can you provide folks with just an overview of the differences in operating a multifamily apartment building compared to a self-storage facility? I know that in a lot of ways it's a different business, right? Like the tenants are different, the leases are different. Can you provide just kind of like a high level overview of maybe your first initial learnings as you had your multifamily mindset getting into the self-storage area?
Absolutely. And I can tell you a lot of it, what was the attractive parts of it too, right? Because, coming from the multifamily background, I understand the idea of running residential real estate. And sort of the main differences are, there's a lot of main differences, but in essence, they're similar, right? You have income that comes in from rent, It's paid monthly, and there's a little bit of other income that you can get from the different types of properties, right? In residential, if you run a nice property, maybe you might get something like you get rubs, or you get ratio utility bill back system, or you have maybe it's like a trash valet. Well, in storage, you might have things like rental insurance, or you might have there's like technology like fees and things like that. And so there's differences in terms of what are the other income, but it's in general it's like rental income, and then there's a little portion of other income, and then a lot of the expenses are going to be have the same categories, but they're just going to have weighted. They're going to be weighted differently. All right. So I'll give an example of like utilities. Like utilities in my apartment building. So like that apartment building we talked about, I pay about like $1,200 a month or something for water. Right. So it's like, okay, I've got to pay common water or whatever. Water bills, $1,200 a month. And it's a 40-unit apartment building. Right. And then when I go to self storage, I was very keen on seeing like, okay, what are the utilities going to be at this place, right? Because there's no plumbing, right? There's no plumbing that's going, in the roofs or anything like that. And so we got our first water bill on our very first apartment, our very first self storage facility. So it was probably like February or March of 2021, our first water bill, and it was $30. And I was like, $30. Yes. Okay. That's what I like to see. Exactly. Like utility costs way down, I mean, yes, there's some electrical, there's no gas, you're not going to have gas there, and there's very little water. Right. And it kind of depends on how you run it and what type of facility. Right. And, so things like that are just weighted differently. Utilities in residential are going to be very high, and you're going to hopefully try to build back some of that from your tenants. And utilities and storage probably going to be fairly low. And you might even have the ability to offset some of that with like there's places that do solar, so you'll put solar panels on all over the whole roofs, and so perhaps you can mitigate some of that. Maybe you do in residential, but not too much. I don't really see too many people, apartment builders, using solar. But there's other things like websites. Okay, so your website on your apartment building is probably very, very basic. Probably not that good. Probably just very informational. Like here's our apartment. Here's some pictures. If you're interested, call us or email us. Right. That's kind of like that's basically it. All right. So you can pay like $50 a month or something like that, and have that website kind of hosted with Wix or whoever it is. But storage is the opposite. The storage is much more like the airlines. It's where there's dynamic pricing that's involved, meaning that, hey, you go there one day, it might be $90 to rent this 10 by 10. You go there another day and it might be $98, or it might be $102, whatever. So it can go up or down depending on these different parameters that you set. So it's much more dynamic. The pricing models are much more, there's like algorithms involved, and the website is much more important because you want people to be able to apply and rent online, and then just kind of do it as automated as possible. So that is one of the bigger things in storage, is that there's storage is farther ahead when it comes to technology, and there's much more automation involved in storage, right? In residential, you're not going to just want to say, hey, just apply online, and then I'm just going to leave the keys underneath the mat, and you just go in there whenever you want to, right? You don't do that in residential. But in storage, you do. You kind of say, okay, well, apply online, put all your stuff in there, put your credit card in there, and then here's your gate code, and then here's your gate code. You're ready to go in, and just go ahead and here's your unit number, right? And so those kind of things are some of the main differences. Operationally, there's going to be you're going to have different property managers are going to be obviously doing similar types of things where you're handling with tenants, but there's just going to be more focus on residential. You're going to have a sort of a higher touch. In storage, you might have a lower touch, but you just want to make it as efficient, as easy as possible. So so a lot of minor differences. There are some major ones. There are some big ones. Not to go on and on, but one of the things that just attracted me to self-storage was like the eviction process, right? The eviction process in residential is a very controversial topic, right? You talk about evictions in California, where I live, very different than evictions in Indianapolis, where my apartment is, right? To Texas, to Virginia. It could be all over the place, right? And a very hotly debated topics right now of like whether or not you have the right to evict people or people have the right to live. It's just a lot of controversy around that. Well, in storage, it's like, okay, I don't think there's really hardly anybody in America that would disagree with this statement. Whereas if I have stuff, okay, I have a bunch of stuff, I have a desk and lamps and whatever, and I just have this stuff, and I put it on somebody else's property, right? They have the right to, and if I stop paying them, they have the right to get rid of it or like make me pay for it, right? So I don't just have the right to go take my stuff and put it on somebody's property and then say, you know what, keep it there and don't move it. I don't want to pay for it either, right? Whereas that's what's kind of happening in residential. So in storage, nobody really, nobody in I guess in America really believes that you can just dump your stuff on somebody's property without paying for it or without the owner having the ability to get rid of it. And so the laws are much more in your favor in storage, where it's like somebody rents from you and they're going to pay, they're going to pay. And if they don't pay, then you have the ability to get rid of it a lot faster and, and just get rid of their stuff, which is basically an auction process. It's a lien process. It's not an eviction process. So,
Mm-hmm. And what does that time period typically look like?
the time period it's state by state. It's different for each state, just like the eviction process is. But in general, I would say it's about 60 days ish. Okay, so it's about, you do have some time frames where you have to notify people. You have to send them certified letters. You have to contact them. Then you have to give them a certain amount of time. You have to advertise this in some type of public forum, whether that's a newspaper or website or something. And then you give them a few days for the auction. The auction is maybe 10 days. And then after that, it's like, okay, no response, no payment. Okay, then let's go ahead and send this to auction, and you auction off the stuff.
Okay.
And then
Fascinating.
just so you know, like we can get into the details of it, but it's like in an eviction, right? When you evict somebody, say just anywhere, whether it's California or Indianapolis, your tenant isn't very happy, right? And they're probably not going to take care of your property for those 2 months that they're being evicted, and they don't really care that eventually they're going to get kicked out. And then if you have to force them out, that's going to cost you more money. So you already have missing 2 months of rent, plus you're going to have a damaged property, plus you may have to force them out, which is a higher cost, and then you got at minimum you got to paint it and clean it. But in storage, you don't do that, right? So there's somebody rents and they don't pay, and you can send them to auction. Eventually, you sell it at auction. The money at auction first comes to pay me as the business owner, right? So if there's anything left over, it goes back to the person. So basically, I get made whole first before the other person gets any of the money from the auction proceeds. So, and then it doesn't take as much to clean it out, right? Like I don't have to paint it and do a thorough cleaning. I just need to basically clean it out, sweep it out, and put a new lock on the door, right? It's much easier.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thanks for providing that overview of, kind of the differences or the major differences in running an apartment building versus a self-storage unit, and some of the different weights and how they vary from one asset class to the other. I'm curious, in self-storage specifically, there are still different categories of properties, correct? So you could have like indoor units that are not climate controlled versus indoor units that are climate controlled versus outdoor units that are like RV or boat storage. Are there more than those three? Can you provide just an overview of that?
There's always a lot of different combinations of things but in general, it is, outdoor self-storage, which is drive up self-storage, right? Which most people have seen. You just kind of drive up to your units. It's an older model. However, it's sometimes still preferred because it's easier to get to your units, right? Although it can be dirtier and maybe not climate controlled. There are climate control, which are generally indoor and can be sometimes smaller units, sometimes a little harder to get to because you might need an elevator to get to them. So sometimes people do not prefer to have a climate controlled unit, although they will cost more. And generally, the reason you're providing them is because they will rent for a higher amount per month. There are also outdoor climate control, just so you know, or drive up climate control. So there are drive up climate control. We have a few. We have a few of them, a few units of them. Not too many facilities have them. Those are the major ones within storage. But no matter, it's like one of those things that storage is still um, much more, I guess, fragmented as in terms of a asset class than multifamily. So you'll find things like this storage facility also has a car wash like on it, and it's like to a combination of this business. And it's like, well, okay, this is two different businesses, but the owner's going to sell it as one. And you're kind of like, well, okay, do I want a car wash business or do I want a storage business? Do I want both or do I want to split them? Some is like half mobile home park and then half storage, right? And so you have these kind of weird combinations because there's a lot of mom and pop owners out there as well.
Yeah. And is there a particular type of property that you prefer to go after when it comes to
Um,
like indoor, outdoor, RV, etc.?
There isn't a particular one. We're open to most of them, right? We're open to all the different kinds, and we have ones. So we have everything from Class A, 5-story building, single building with elevators, things like that, to Class B, which is a smaller building, but single building as well, just a little bit older, all the way to Class C, which is all drive up, built in 1980, 1990, older models, just plain drive up, nothing fancy about them, but just just place to store your stuff. So um, I would say, there between those three, there isn't really a preference that I have. Um, it's it's more about what else is there, because sometimes your outdoor ones don't have paved roads, right? So the roads in between them are just grass or gravel or dirt. Um, some of them are newer where it is paved and it's a lot nicer. It's like it's either paved in between. So it's not so much about the actual structures. It's more of like what else is there that I have to take care of? Do I have to repair these roads? Do these roads look good? What about the security, the lighting, the fencing, um, entryways, gates? All of that is a little bit more of my concern rather than whether it's climate controlled or not.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for shedding light on that. Now,
Mm-hmm.
when you go about looking for a new self storage property, um,
Mm-hmm.
I know that you're looking across the country. Are you looking at market specific properties, or are you more so concerned about the property itself and the numbers wherever it is?
Yeah, I think these are two. These are two approaches that in general people will take. Right? Do I figure out what market is it that I want to focus on, and then just buy properties in that market and become a market expert? Sort of the rifle approach, right? High accuracy, high precision. Or do I take the shotgun approach where I look all over the United States and I'm really just kind of agnostic to whatever region it is? Um, I take the shotgun approach. All right. And there is a reason for that. And that stemmed from the very beginning of my investing in real estate, which was I live in California and I'm not investing in my backyard. Right. So now, if I'm not investing in my backyard, does that mean that I need to want to tie myself to a specific geographic area? Do I want to say, okay, you know what? Salt Lake City is the area I want to invest in, and I'm going to spend all my time in figuring out that this area and knowing the brokers, knowing the area, like I'm a local. Um, to me, that was like kind of limiting. Like if I lived there, I would say, okay, that's a good idea because I can just drive around to these places. But since I don't live there, the difference between Salt Lake City and Kansas City and Dallas or I don't know all over the place was to me it was like, well, it's just a flight difference. I don't know. It doesn't really matter to me of what state what city it is. So in that way, I feel like I can kind of reach out to the whole United States because our properties we're in 5 different states in terms of storage. So Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Connecticut. And so, but we're open to the majority of the United States. And that's how I approach it. I would tell you that the good part of it is that you have the whole United States as your place that you can buy from, right? You're open to. The bad part about it is, though, if you want to really get into going direct to seller. So people will ask you, where do you find your deals? Is it through a broker? Are you direct to seller? What are you doing? If you go direct to seller, um, you have too broad of an area, right? It's like I can't use the whole United States and go direct to seller. That's just too much. Because what happens is say somebody in North Carolina says to me like, yeah, you know what, I'm interested in selling. I send them a letter and they say, oh, okay, yeah, great. I got your letter. It says you're interested in buying my storage unit. Why don't you come take a look at the property and see what you think, and then we'll talk about an offer. And I'm like, okay, so I got to fly to North Carolina to look at this property to find out if it's worth it or not, and then try to figure out if I'm going to make an offer. To me, that's a waste of time. So I just instead would rather not go the direct to seller route and just kind of use the whole scope of the United States. So kind of a long answer, but yeah, shotgun approach is what I do.
Yeah, but yeah, helpful to hear your approach there. And so as you're looking at different facilities in different markets, I imagine one of the big things you look at is demand. Like, is there a demand for self-storage in this area? What are the key things you look at to assess that?
Mm-hmm. Sure. In general, there's like three things. Okay. And I'll tell you that initially there's a metric out there that's called it's called square foot per capita, meaning how many square feet is there per person in this whatever radius you're seeking. So 3-mile radius, 5-mile radius, how many square feet is there of storage per person? And there's generally sort of a national average or a national mean of a little more than about 7 or 8 square foot per person. And so if you look at markets that have a lower number, well, that means there's higher demand and that maybe is a better place. And you look at places that have like a score of like 11 or 12 square feet per person. Well, you may say, well, this could be oversaturated. It sounds like there's more facilities, more rental than there are people, or not than there are people, but just a higher amount. And that was what I looked at, I would say, in the beginning. And that was what I looked at. And I thought that was like the sort of magic number that everybody is trying to figure out. And you can get those numbers. I mean, those numbers are available to, if you subscribe to certain services, they'll give you those numbers. However, that is I think that's a rookie mistake. So that is what I did when I was a rookie. And the real numbers you need to look at are occupancy levels in the area. So in a 3 to 5 mile radius, the occupancy levels. So what is the occupancy of your competitors? So your competitors are, are they at 90%? Are they at 100%? Are they at 70%? What are their occupancy levels? And then and then you're trying to find out their rates too. Okay, so it's a combination of their rates and their occupancy level. So if their rates are, say for a 10 by 10, it's $100. That's $1 per square foot. You're kind of like, okay, is it $1 per square foot for a 10 by 10? Is it below that? Is it $70? Is it 70 cents a square foot? Is it, $1.50 a square foot? And then you can try to judge whether or not, okay, this market, you can charge higher rents in this particular market. But occupancy, you can get those numbers off of different places that you can subscribe to in terms of like what are the dollar amounts, or you can just go to the websites. And a lot of times people list their websites. They'll list what the prices are, right? Because you're trying to attract tenants, and in order for a tenant to rent your unit, they need to know what the price is. So a lot of times it's just listed right on their website. But occupancy levels are not. Occupancy levels are a lot harder to get, and there is no quick, easy way to get it. The only way that sort of I know how is either one, you got to call and make as many phone calls as you can and try to get through and try to get that occupancy level from the person that is maybe on staff there, or you have to visit and pretend like you're a renter and do the sort of secret shopping and try to figure out like, okay, how many units do you have of this size? Okay, well, how many units do you have of this size? All right, well, I'm not. I'm trying to judge between what size I'm going to get, and you try to figure out like around what the occupancy levels are for that particular competitor. And those are the only two ways that I know to get it. There's no database that you can subscribe to that will have those levels, and a lot of times they don't want to give them to you, just so you know. So it's not like, hey, let's just put up our listing of what our occupancy level is at. So it can be a little bit of a little more of a daunting, a little more of a tougher due diligence than just looking at square foot per capita. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I appreciate the secret shopper tip there. I can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
So even you'll do this remotely, just in terms of if you're exploring a property and doing your due diligence, you will call other facilities in the area and just say, "Hey, I'm interested in a couple units. Do you have X number of these sizes?" And just try to gauge how many they have left, and then run those numbers yourself that way.
Yes, but we will go in person before we
Okay.
actually buy the property. So that's part of our market study that we'll do. And we also
Yeah.
have a third party who will do it as well. So not only we will do it, we'll have somebody else verify and verify what the numbers that they're seeing as far as occupancy levels and rental rates.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And is there anything you look for in the city itself? Are you looking at other city demographics and data such as population growth and job growth and other, I guess, just general drivers that would suggest there's going to be population growth, which would likely
Yeah.
increase the demand for self storage units?
Yes and no. I would say yes, we are, but it's not as important as it is in multifamily. Multifamily, those demographics that you mentioned, population growth, job diversity, affordability, things like that are super important. And you're looking at an entire metro, right? You're looking at an entire metro, like, okay, how is this whole metro doing, and what's it doing in going to do in the near future? In storage, it's much more of a micro market because nobody's going to come from across the state or across the city to come all the way to your facility. They're only going to come within like a 3 to 5 mile radius. So that's why I've mentioned that 3 to 5 mile radius a couple of times, because most of your renters are going to be in that radius. They're not going to come from across the city because there's 10, 11, 12, 15, maybe 20 different storage facilities that they pass through all the way just to get to yours. So unless they have a reason for being there, it's unlikely that they're going to come to you. So you need to look at your micro market in a much more uh, like that. That's much more important to you than the overall market, right? Obviously, those demographics that you mentioned are important. So you don't want to go to a city that's declining and things are just looking bad and crime rates are through the roof, and that just that would just be kind of a that would not be prudent to do that. But if it's it doesn't have to be growing super fast. It can be just a stable location. Doesn't have to be like a crazy amount of job growth or anything. It could just be sometimes they're just very small towns. Now we haven't gone to a very very small town, but a lot of storage does very well in very very small towns, and I mean like 10,000 people, right? And it could be even lower, but storage can do well depending on what else is around that area. If you're by a lake or by the mountains or something, you can attract people that you'd be surprised that they'll store their stuff there. Um, but yeah, I would say that in general, that micro market is a much more, you need to do your analysis on that micro market a lot more than the macro market.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's say that you've identified a property that you're interested in. You feel good about the micro market surrounding it
Mm-hmm.
and feel like there's good demand there. Um, Commercial real estate, as we know, is valued based off of largely the NOI. And
Mm-hmm.
so I imagine there's some type of value add strategy or approach you often take with these to be able to go in and both increase occupancy and increase rates. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I imagine similar to multifamily, there are ways to over improve a property to where you won't get that, you know, much of a return on your improvements. But I also imagine there are some key things that should always be in place that you have confidence will indeed contribute to increasing the occupancy and increasing the rates. So do you
Mhm.
have kind of like a go-to playbook that you look at when you're analyzing a property and saying like, oh, this is an outdoor facility and it doesn't have paved roads in between, we could add pavement around, which would increase the rates we could charge, or adding a gate with the lock box and all that type of stuff? Like what are some of
Mhm.
those property improvements that you find to be your go-to improvements to help increase the NOI?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I do get this question that comes up a decent amount. And the way that I see it is that there's four different areas of value add that we're looking for. Okay, and these four are low rent. So we've bought facilities before that are fairly full, right? They're above 90% when we bought them, and but the rents were really low. Right? The rents were just really low in the market. There's just people, previous owner wanted to keep it low to keep the occupancy up, but the market had moved way up in the last years, and they hadn't raised rates in years. So low rent is one. Um, Low occupancy is another one, right? So there's other ones that like based off our occupancy studies. The occupancy is like 80 to 85, 90% in this area. All the competitors are at 90% in the peak season, and 85 in the off season. But this facility, for some reason, is at 60 or 65 or 55. So we've bought facilities that are like that as well. So that's low occupancy. There are another value add piece is expansion. So how um, how much uh, how much expansion possibilities are there? Right? Is there any room to add things like portable units, portable storage units? Is there a way to organize the parking a little different to make it more uniform? Is there a way to maybe make covered parking there and charge more? Or do we have extra land? So we have ones where we bought where there's extra land available, and then we've actually bought one where we bought some extra land, we bought some more land, right? And so it's just like, hey, let's just buy an additional piece of land, and it was up for sale, and so we were just like, hey, let's go buy this piece of land too. I mean, it just makes this whole property more valuable for whatever we want to do in the future. So that's number three is the expansion piece, and number four is the operational inefficiencies. So basically, taking the property and saying, what can we do to run this a little bit cheaper, right, and make it a little more efficient. So is it that we need to collect more? Is it something about like like some of the ones that we run are we run them unmanned, and so when we run them unmanned, perhaps we're not paying payroll costs, from the previous owner what they were paying as payroll costs, and sometimes it's other things like we think that we have either a better system for whether that's advertising or maybe we don't need the you don't need the utilities like they were using the utilities, all different types of things as far as like in what ways can we cut costs. So those are the four different areas: low rent, low occupancy, expansion, and operational inefficiencies. And we're looking for any combination of those, and that's what we look for as our value add in a way to increase our NOI and increase the value of our property.
Thanks for sharing that. That makes it very straightforward to analyze a property, I imagine. Um,
Mm-hmm.
are there things like, do you have standard protocols for how you approach, say, security? That's something that I've always been curious about with self storage properties, simply
Mm-hmm.
because there's so much stuff just sitting there. Seems like
Mm-hmm.
it's primed to be robbed and an issue with theft. But how do you approach that? And do you have kind of like a standardized approach across all of your properties, or do you really assess it on a property by property basis?
Yeah. For us, the way that we do it is property by property. However, some properties have gone through a significant amount of security enhancements, and some have not. And so we just kind of take it as it goes. And so we kind of lean on our previous experience to say, okay, that this is gonna. How about we do this at this property? How about we do this at this property? But if they don't need it, then we don't necessarily want to just go spend money on doing something that we feel like is unnecessary. But I will tell you that some of the most important things when it comes to security are lighting. Okay, so you got to make sure your lighting is good, and you got to make sure you're lit up bright, and people feel safe, and there's not a lot of dark corners where people just aren't sure what's around the corner, right? So you don't want that. So you want it to be lit up very well. And just so you know, too, the studies of who is who is renting. There's actually more females that are renting than males, although there's probably males that maybe visit the facility more often. But in terms of who is actually doing the renting, there's a higher percentage of females than males. And when they poll them, security is number one issue. Right? Is the place
Mm.
secure, clean? Right? Security and cleanliness. So the so lighting is one. Cameras are another thing. So you want to, if you feel like there's a need, cameras are important. Where you can, there's a lot of different camera systems now that can set up and record things. There you can look at it through your phone. You have access to your phone, and you can even have monitoring systems out there that will monitor the cameras 24/7 if you need to, or a certain time if you need to. Right? It's not cheap. It can cost quite a bit, but if you need somebody to monitor them, they can monitor them, and they can put loudspeakers where the cameras are, so that they can talk to people and tell them like, "Hey, I see you over here. You shouldn't be here. You should get out before the police come. I'm calling the police, whatever," to make sure your facility is secure. Also, fencing. So depending on where you are, inside of an urban area, fencing is probably just the norm. However, you want to make sure it's adequate, right? So if it requires fixing or adding something to reinforce your fences, that's important. But then when you get to some rural areas, sometimes there is no fencing. These are just facilities that are just wide open, so anybody could walk into the facility from any direction. And so you have that. That is a possibility that you might need to put a fence around it. So those are I would say the major ones. Is that lighting, cameras, fencing. Those are the major things when it comes to security for your facility.
Yeah. And if there is ever an event that is security related, I imagine those are probably your property managers that are handling that situation as it comes up.
Yes. So we have third party property managers, and they will be the ones that will handle that kind of on a day to day basis, of whatever's needed, is the issue on camera? What do we see? What's the complaint? Or hey, there's certain things that need to be fixed. The fence needs to be fixed. Let's get a quote, or let's put a fence in. We don't have a fence, and if we're going to put a fence, we need to put a gate, and we need it to be an automatic gate. And so some of the things when you do have an automatic gate, the good thing is you have a code, and you give that gate code is a personalized gate code, right? So when somebody signs up, somebody comes to your facility, say they just drive up and they see their facility, they're outside the fence, and it says, okay, here's our website. Go to our website or scan this QR code, and you can sign up. They scan it. They go to the website. They put in all their information, and then they hit submit. They get emailed and then texted. They're like, here's your lease, here's your agreement, here's your gate code, and then here's your unit number, right? And so when they punch in their gate code, it is specific to that person. So we know if that person is trying to get in late at night, when they shouldn't be, or they're using the wrong code for some reason, or whatever it is. We know who that is that's trying to use that code. Maybe because when we going back to the sort of the lien process, the auction process, on day 5, or I would say day 6, when they are officially late and they haven't made any payments for the first 5 days, the gate code gets automatically shut down. So if they try to come in and say, you know what, I'm just going to come in and grab my stuff, and then I'm going to jam out so I don't have to pay this month, well, your gate code is no longer working. And so we see you punch in your gate code, and then you basically, it says like invalid or something, and then you call up and say, hey, well, how come my gate code doesn't work? Well, your credit card, expired, so we need your new credit card. Oh, okay. Well, if you want to get in put in your new credit card information. So yeah, that's the benefits of having like a gate code and personalized codes for your tenants is that you know who's in your facility, at all times.
And so it sounds like on the back end, you are automating this. Are there a few softwares? I imagine there are a couple competitors that do similar things
Mm-hmm.
on that front, but are there a couple softwares that you have looked into and would recommend to investors that are looking in the self storage space?
Yeah, I would tell anyone there's a number of different softwares, and it depends on what you're looking for, right? If you're looking for somebody that is say you're on the sort of lower end, maybe you have a smaller facility. Um, if you have a smaller facility, you might have to run it yourself, so you might have to be an operator yourself, right? You might not be able to afford property manager in there. So in those cases, they have certain software that's a little bit more like, hey, this is the box, right? You're buying the software in the box. It doesn't do much outside of the box, but it can help you put up a website. It help you manage your units, and give you sort of um, sort of a standard view of how to manage it with the software. So yes, there's things like that are cheaper, and there's ones that are just more expensive, and they can do more, and they integrate with your gate code, and they integrate with other things that you have, payment systems and all kinds of things like that. So there's a number of different ones. If your audience wants to know, they can just reach out to me, and I can shoot them like who I would go to. Sometimes I don't like to give it just on right here, just because sometimes I don't know, like right now I'm in a dispute with one of them. And so I'm like, well, I do use them, but doesn't mean I'm going to give you an endorsement. So, so yeah, but they can just
Yeah,
let me know. There's a few options out
perfect.
there.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And then you mentioned a handful of minutes ago, high season versus low season.
Mm-hmm.
Is this something that is applicable across the board in any market you're in, or is this something that is more applicable to a facility that is in like a tourist town or as a mountain town or somewhere that has got like very seasonal activities associated with it?
Mm-hmm. I would tell you that it's a little bit of both. Right. So sometimes facilities have um, specific seasonality that may be a little bit different than the general self storage seasonality. So I'll give you an example of one. So we own one that's in a college town, okay, and it's big college town, big football school, and we're about 6 blocks away from that football stadium. And it's the University of Alabama. So if you're a sports fan at all, the University of Alabama is a huge football team, program there. So we're really close, and so um, that facility has a certain peak time and like rental season, which is follows students being out of their dormitories or out of their other places that they're renting, their house that they're renting. So once they get out, they need to store their stuff, right? And so that place fills up quick, very fast with all these students. Um, and that is a little bit of a different cycle than the rest of the self storage, which is a little bit more of along the same lines of residential. Like you're going to have your high seasons when students aren't in school. So like you're kind of like late spring to summer is going to be your prime renting seasons. In the wintertime, just like in residential, it's not many people are trying to move their stuff during the holidays, right? It's not the time that people are thinking about like going, I don't know, to their storage unit to move stuff or to move into a storage unit. They might go get their Christmas tree out of their storage unit and their Christmas lights or whatever like that, and they might go to it. But you don't have a lot of people moving in and out of at that time. So it follows the same sort of cycle that residential does on a sort of a industry standard, but there could be different peak times, off season times with a specific location that you have.
That makes perfect sense, and I appreciate you walking through the differences and how the immediate area can definitely impact the operational flow and occupancy in general of a particular
Mm-hmm.
property. So thanks for doing that. I
Mm-hmm.
know we're coming up on time here, so I want to be mindful of that. Before we wrap, as you look back at your journey, starting in single family, working your way to multifamily, now with the focus on self-storage, is there a lesson that you've learned that you didn't know at the beginning of your journey that has, been a paramount shift for you, and something you regularly keep in mind as you acquire new properties now?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the very first one was the one I kind of mentioned before about that you can invest outside of where you live, right? That was a huge one for me. And as I was starting out, um, maybe that's more common now, but like, I guess almost 10 years ago, it wasn't so common that people were talking about it on podcasts, right? And we're talking about how they own properties, in other states. Um, but it's a lot more common now, and that was a big shift for me. The second one really is understanding that if you get involved on the active side, so if you are, say, you're doing a syndication, and you want to be a general partner, you want to be one of the people that is on the active side, not just a limited partner, but an active partner, or you're doing a joint venture, you're one of the active partners, or you're buying the property yourself. There is a lot. You are basically running a business. Okay. You're not necessarily passive investing. You are running a business. And as a business owner, somebody that is doing business, you need to sharpen your other business skills, which include things like, it's not just, hey, I tell the property manager to collect rent, and they just collect rent, and then I just get a check. And then that's all I'm doing as a general partner. It's like, you have to be aware of all the accounting. There's a lot of accounting things that go on. And like, you got to learn, okay, what's the difference? Are we using cash or are we using accrual basis? It's like, well, I don't know. I'm not an accountant. So I don't know that, but you got to start learning that stuff. You got to start learning how to do this, how to categorize this. Why are we categorizing this as CapEx versus an operational expense? And how does that affect our taxes? Okay. And how does that affect our bank account? And then like, there's a lot of little things of like, okay, should we do this? Should we do that? It's a lot of it is a business. So if you run it like a business, like where are all your documents in? Where you have sort of a vault of your documents, you just throw them all in your email or just in your Google Drive. You got to organize this as like a business that if somebody else comes in, they can kind of plug in and understand, hey, okay, they have a system of how to do these things. And, and I can understand it rather than it's just all in my head. And then whether it's these contracts and I don't know, I guess I got to look in my email for these contracts and I don't remember where they are. Things can become overwhelming pretty quickly. So as you're scaling, as you're growing up, really got to take this on as like understanding, like there's certain principles of running a business that are very applicable to running a successful self-storage portfolio or residential portfolio, or whatever it is, any kind of real estate portfolio. So I would say that one is something that I learned, and I'm consistently learning with that.
Yeah, thank you. This has been a fantastic overview of self-storage, and I know there seems to be growing interest in the asset class in general. So thank you for sharing your experiences and your journey. I'm sure there are lots of people out there that will gain immense value from this. So thank you. We will definitely include your social media links and a link to your business in the show notes. If people want to reach out to you, I encourage anybody listening to reach out to Powell if you have any questions. And thank you again. It's been a pleasure having you. Thanks for tuning in to the Active Commercial Real Estate Investing Show, brought to you by the one and only School of Commercial Real Estate Investing. Be sure to head over to our website at www.schoolofcrei.com for more free resources. While you're there, subscribe to our newsletter so you never miss a thing.